You're a few weeks into your fat loss journey and you've seen consistent drops on the scale. And then all of a sudden, boom, it stops. Hasn't moved in days. Have you failed? Is there something wrong with your metabolism? Maybe you need to change your diet, or maybe you need to crank up your cardio. Well, in this video, I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide into how to break through the plateau and get that weight dropping off again. Welcome to the channel. My name is Ryan. I'm an ex-NRL player, online coach, and natural bodybuilder. And this channel is all about finding the most efficient way to help you lose fat and build muscle. Now, first of all, we need to talk about why the scale may stall. Weight loss is never linear. It always has its ups and downs. Now, although we may be losing fat every day, this can be completely masked on the scale by how much our body water fluctuates from day to day. Even in the most aggressive of fat loss phases where you might be losing 150 grams of fat per day, our body water can fluctuate 1 to 2 kilos, which can completely mask even the most successful of fat loss phases. Now, some common reasons why you may see a stall on the scale, especially when going into a fat loss phase, is firstly food volume. Now, I talk about having high volume foods that are lower in calorie density, making it easier to stick to a calorie deficit. But with that higher volume is obviously going to increase the amount of food that we have in our stomach and intestines, which will increase the number on the scale. And another reason may be that because we're trying to save calories, we'll generally not use sauces and creams to try and flavor our food. So we might resort to seasonings and salt, which has high sodium intake, which will lead to us drinking more water and also lead to more fluid retention. Again, nothing to do with fat loss, but it will affect the number on the scale. And two other common variables is sleep and also going through high stress. This can affect our cortisol levels, which will lead to water retention and lead to increase in weight on the scale. Now, this is why I recommend weighing in multiple times per week so that we can get a trend rather than a snapshot in time. Following this trend will give us a much better indication into actually how much fat we are losing over an extended period of time. Now, because of how much our weight will change from day to day due to water fluctuations, if you have stalled for a couple of days or even up to a week, I honestly would not be concerned because you may be losing fat underneath the hood, but is getting disguised by the amount of water fluctuation or water retention that you have on a day-to-day basis. So if it's less than a week, I honestly would just keep things as they are, especially if you had a big initial drop in weight or you had a steady period of continuous weight loss. A stall is completely normal, especially if it's only a few days or a week. However, if it's been more than 2 weeks, then you should ask yourself these 4 questions. First is, are you new to lifting or new to a high protein diet? For these particular individuals, they could be putting on that much muscle mass in the initial stages that it could almost be equivalent to how much fat they're actually losing. So although the number on the scale isn't changing, they're actually losing fat whilst building muscle. Now, for these particular people, I would look to use check-in photos or measurements or just seeing how your clothes are fitting, because the scale isn't going to give you an accurate representation into what's actually happening during your fat loss phase. You may actually be losing fat and building muscle, resulting in no change on the scale. And number 2, have you recently started taking creatine? When we start our fat loss journey, we want to get all the good supplements, and I recommend creatine because it's going to help you with maintaining muscle, maintaining strength, and give you more energy in the gym when we're going through a fat loss phase. However, creatine can cause water retention of up to 1 to even 2 kilos in some individuals. Now, this is the good type of water retention that is intracellular, so it gets stored in the muscle, which makes you look more jacked. It is still going to affect the number that we see on the scale. Now, this can be the same thing if you are someone who has recently started a high carbohydrate diet. As I spoke about before, I generally recommend high volume foods. Now, high volume foods are generally going to come from carbohydrate sources, things like potatoes, veg, fruit, because they have a lot of fiber. They're going to keep us more satiated and great foods for fat loss. When you eat carbohydrates, you will also store glycogen in the muscle, which is great because it's going to fuel our workouts. But when we store glycogen in the muscle, for every gram of carbohydrate or glycogen that we store in the muscle, it takes 3 mils of water. So if we've increased our carbohydrates per day by 1 to even 200 grams, this could mean half a kilo to even a kilo of weight gain on the scale. If you have recently started creatine or incorporated a high carbohydrate diet, I would give it a week to even 2 weeks for your body to calm down to be able to see if the scale starts to drop again. And lastly, are you under high stress or maybe you're getting poor sleep at the moment? Because this can increase cortisol levels within the body, which will lead to fluid retention. Now, this isn't the same as the water retention that we see intracellular. It's subcutaneous, the one that makes us look a bit filmy. However, it still has nothing to do with fat loss and everything to do with water retention. So if you are someone who's suffering from high stress or lack of sleep at the moment, I would try to rectify that first, as that may unlock the further loss on the scale. And if none of these apply to you, then maybe there's been a change in your behavior. Your daily activity may have dropped. Now, NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is the activity we do outside of exercise. And aside from our metabolism, it's the biggest contributor to how many calories we burn on a day-to-day basis. And a drop in NEAT could easily bring you from a calorie deficit back to maintenance. For example, I started working with a client who had quite inconsistent fat loss results. 1 week they were good, 1 week not so good. And when they started working with me, I got them to track their steps. Now, on 1 week, they were getting 12,000 steps all week long. And then the next week, they were getting less than 5,000. What was happening is that they shared a dog. So the week that they had their dog, they were getting heaps of steps due to the amount of walking they were doing with the dog. But the week that they didn't, they were getting barely any steps at all. So what we did was increase the steps on the week that they didn't have the dog, and they started losing weight consistently again. So this may be the reason why you have stalled in your fat loss journey. I find this especially common for people who work some days in the office and work some days at home. Generally, because of the commute, they will walk more and get more steps throughout the day, whereas when they're stuck at home, they won't get as many steps. So trying to standardize and track your steps day in, day out is going to give you the best opportunity to make sure you can stick to a calorie deficit. And secondly, are you getting sloppy with your tracking? When we first start off, we're super motivated, we're weighing everything, we're making sure that everything that we put inside our mouth is chucked through MyFitnessPal. But as we get further into the fat loss journey and we start to become complacent, we won't weigh our veg, we won't weigh our fruit, start to eyeball things, start to use tablespoon and teaspoon measurements as opposed to grammage. All these things can add up to hundreds of calories a day, bringing us out of our calorie deficit and putting us back to calorie maintenance, resulting in the stall that we're seeing on the scale. So making sure that we're staying on top of our steps and making sure that we're staying diligent with our tracking is a surefire way to make sure that you continue to lose fat in your fat loss phase. And if none of these apply to you and you've been stalled for multiple weeks, then your energy expenditure may have caught up to what used to be your calorie deficit and you're actually now at calorie maintenance. If you are this person, what I would do is I would look to increase activity first, especially if you're someone who's getting less than 7,000 steps a day. I would be looking to bring that up closer to 10,000. And if you're someone who doesn't have the time to get in extra steps, potentially you could chuck in a couple of cardio sessions per week. This is going to increase our daily energy expenditure, which will hopefully put us back into a calorie deficit and get the scale moving again. If steps are maxed out and we literally don't have any more time in the day to increase our energy expenditure, then we need to take it from our food. I suggest dropping your calories by 200 calories per day, giving it 1 to 2 weeks, and this should kickstart that rate of loss again. And if it does stall for another 1 to 2 weeks, then we potentially might have to do it again. However, in most cases, that initial drop of 200 calories will last you a fairly long time. As a little bit of a recap, guys, make sure that you don't just jump straight into incorporating more steps, adding in cardio and dropping calories. Make make sure you go through that checklist to see if it's something else that may be holding you back. You may actually be losing fat and building muscle, or potentially you started your creatine and high carbohydrate journey and you might be losing fat and doing quite a good job, but it's just being disguised on the scales. Or potentially you've just gotten a little bit sloppy with your steps or with your tracking of calories. So make sure you tick these things off before going straight to slashing calories and increasing steps. As always, guys, hope this has helped. Do those good things, like, subscribe, share, leave a comment in the comment section below. Plus, all my links are in the description. We got the 21-step guide to fat loss, the fat loss checklist. Also, I have training programs for 3, 4, and 5 days per week, all linked for free below. And if you'd like to work with myself, that link is in the description as well. But until next time, I think YouTube recommends that you should watch this video, so I'd check it out. Talk soon.